2020's been an amazing year for games. The new consoles have landed and we've at last seen some truly long-awaited AAA titles get a release. Monster projects like The Last of Us Part 2 and Cyberpunk 2077. But it's not all about the expected. There have been surprise hits. The indie titles, the retro throwbacks, the experimental efforts. It's certainly not been an easy year, but really we've had no shortage of good stuff to play. As is tradition then, I put together a personal list of my favourites of 2020, games which blew me away in one way or another, or just kept me glued to the controller for most of the year. So without further ado, let's get started at number 5. Yakuza Like a Dragon takes what we know and love about the Yakuza series, but gives it a fresh spin. The huge city to explore, the diversions, minigames, the careful balance between over-the-top humour and hard-boiled crime drama. That's all here in true Yakuza series style. But this time, developer Ryuga Gotoku Studio dares to drop the 3D brawling for purely turn-based RPG mechanics, and it actually works. Sure, it's a big change of pace, but a welcome one. You have assignable jobs for every character, which opens the way for different moves. Better still, the change of pace means you can unleash long, often hilarious specials. It's all a bit of a surprise, but it really grew on me. I laughed a lot. The change in setting to Yokohama and a new main cast also makes Like a Dragon an easy jumping on point for newcomers to the series. It feels new. Combined with the usual wealth of extras, including the option to play classic arcade games, or even a minigame where you run your own business, it's a world you can easily lose yourself to. By far, it's one of the most exciting entries in the series to date, up there with Yakuza 0 for offering a captivating story and world. And that's why it comes in at number 5. At number 4 is Streets of Rage 4. A pulsing synth soundtrack, responsive controls, and beautiful sprite work combine to create a true successor to the Mega Drive trilogy. It's a league ahead in visual quality of course, but it does the series justice, and that's the magic of it. The spirit of 4's core gameplay is so faithful to those classics. Every hit has a powerful crunch to it. Cornering a group of thugs in a mid-air combo feels rewarding, and it doesn't skimp on the difficulty either. Even the normal setting gives a solid challenge. As a side-scrolling brawler, it looks simple on the surface, but the more you play, the more depth it reveals. Learning enemy attack patterns is key here. Equally, the use of special moves adds a nice tactical twist, forcing you to gamble on getting your health back after using it on several high-power moves. Much like Sonic Mania, Streets of Rage 4 isn't a simple recreation. It's a reimagining of what the series could have been on more powerful hardware with the 2D sprite route. It's easily up there as one of the prettiest games on Switch 2, which is how I played it. Every sprite pops, bursts with colour. The levels are amazing too. From the rough city streets to police headquarters, it injects variety at every point. An easy highlight of my 2020 then, and the perfect retro throwback. In number 3, it's Call of Duty Warzone. Yes, it's an extension of a 2019 game, but if you've played Warzone this year, you'll know it's very much its own beast now. It's been a sensation, and mostly thanks to the strong support it's had since release. The photorealistic look helps ground the action, all film grain, authentic weaponry, and the muted colours. But there's plenty of silliness in there too, like staging a comeback from the Gulag, or how it's made events out of stuff like the opening of the stadium. It's got just the right level of fun thrown in to steer it clear of being overly serious. And that's not to mention the Cold War reboot too. It's a carnival of all things Call of Duty, whatever that happens to be at the time, throwing 200 players in and seeing who comes out first, and I love it. Another quick point here, of course a lot of the fun in Warzone depends on getting a good squad together, and personally, it's for this reason that it helped me get through lockdown. It was the right game for me at the right time, letting me link up with friends on PS4, Xbox One or PC, even when we were split apart. Warzone deserves credit for this alone, I think, for adapting through the year and keeping things exciting, fresh, with the repetition set in everywhere else. For many, I suspect that game would be Animal Crossing on Switch, a great game with a therapeutic element, but this one was mine. Warzone is easily my most played game of 2020 for this reason. And let's hope it holds just as strong in 2021. In second place, it's Tony Hawk's 1 and 2 Remaster. Growing up with the original PlayStation, it's hard to forget the impact Tony Hawk's 1 and 2 had. The original Warehouse demo was a serious eye-opener, a combo-driven arcade game hitting just as 90s skater culture took a lift. It controlled beautifully, gave us freedom to explore big 3D cities, and all put to a great punk rock soundtrack. Later Tony Hawk's games built on the formula with mechanics like the manual, the revert, and wall plants. But those original two will always be the classics, the two that truly broke new ground. Developer Vicarious Visions nailed it then, in taking on the 2020 remaster of 1 and 2, easily being the best game to bear the Tony Hawk's name in many years. The execution here is flawless. It's fluid 60fps gameplay paired with classic level design. From school to Marseille, it's just amazing to see all these levels come to life on modern hardware. It's a huge success then, and really shows just how desperately fans needed a good quality Tony Hawk's game. Plenty of great skating series have come since the series peak, Ollie Ollie and Skate to name a few, but for me this is still the best. The hunt for the highest points total, the string of holds, flips, grinds and manual tricks, it's still wonderfully addictive. There's a powerful just one more hook to it, and the core mechanics here feel authentic to the originals, while of course still offering tweaks and changes as an option, like the manual to revert. On that note, I'd love to see Vicarious tackle Tony Hawk's 3. They struck a winner here, and it deserves an encore of some kind, even if it comes as DLC. Either way, Tony Hawk's 1 and 2 Remaster is in second place for my game of 2020. In first place, there's no question for me, it's Final Fantasy VII Remake. The wait was definitely worth it, a true ground-up reworking of one of Squaresoft's most famous JRPGs. Now I will say straight up, not everything is perfect. Its early dungeon design can veer on the tedious, especially the reactor segments which can feel a bit barren, a bit plain. The score is often brilliant too, but it doesn't quite recreate the oppressiveness of Uematsu's original soundtrack, with its synth strings, choirs and bell strikes. Still, the positives really shine through. The characters, the Midgar slums, on a visual level are both so beautifully brought to life. If you're a fan of the PS1 original, it's a shock to see low polygon versions of Cloud, Tifa and Aerith, with their blocky arms, become so fully fleshed out. Also, Midgar now feels truly lived in ways the original could only suggest. NPCs just have more things to say. They have reactions to the bombings, the pollution engulfing the city. Even the class divide in Midgar is better illustrated as you move between its richest and poorest sectors. The world now feels built up, and it sets the stage for a great story. I love the extra attention paid to the city, and on hindsight the choice to hone the story down to the Midgar section now feels justified. A sharper focus clearly helps for getting the tone right for Final Fantasy VII's first few chapters before telling its next, whenever that might land. The battle system is also a surprise win too. Moving away from the classic ATB combat to this fully real-time approach was a bold play, but a necessary one I think to try something new. There's elements of Final Fantasy XIII's staggering system here, which was arguably the best part of that game. It forms the core strategy in taking down enemies. Simply put, find the most effective way to stagger and the rest flows easily. There's plenty of weapons upgrades too, and ways to link materia on each weapon slot, which lets you tackle each battle a bit like a puzzle to be solved. All round, it works surprisingly well. Final Fantasy VII Remake somehow pulls it off. It's the kind of game you half expected to fail, buckling under the weight of expectation. Recreating what made the original so magical in 1997 wouldn't work today, but it succeeds in finding its own definition of quality. The presentation, the combat, the detailing of its characters and cyberpunk fantasy world tied together to create one of 2020's best games. It's a joy to play for Final Fantasy VII nostalgics, and the best single-player Final Fantasy game in many, many years. That about wraps up my list for the year. Thanks so much for making it to the end if you did. Obviously, plenty of highlights missed my personal top 5, The Last of Us Part 2 is stunning of course, as is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Two genuinely great games I can't wait to play more of in 2021. It's been one of the best years for games in recent memory, and I really can't wait to see what else the new year brings. In the meantime though, if you did enjoy this list, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, have a great holidays and see you in the new year.